Welcome back to the M&M podcast, and we have got a special treat today. This is our first band interview. We are interviewing Will Brown from the UK-based band Marseille.
Mm.
And we touch on a lot of stuff, their new music, their new single Thinker is available now. And really we talk music, we talk how they got together and really just chopped it up. It was a pretty good conversation, Alex?
Yeah, I know. Just exciting to talk shop and just hear the influences and the just kind of how he's building the band from the ground up. And it's interesting to hear. So yeah.
We're also able, obviously, to kind of discuss like modern the music business basically, and maybe some of the benefits as well as a lot of the downsides that come with it. But really interesting conversation, and I think we might have them on again later when their album comes out, so stay tuned for that. But for now, enjoy the interview.
And we were just listening to some of his stuff and wanted to bring him on and just talk shop like we normally do, talking to everything Marseille.
Yeah, and I was able to listen to some of your songs, Will. I really enjoyed it. I think I kind of just wanted to start with maybe some of the bands or artists that influenced your music, specifically, obviously, with Marseille.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot that go into it. Like when I first got into music, the first person that really spoke to me was Bob Marley. So it's a bit different from what we're doing now, but it's what got me into music. I'd say a lot of the stuff from 90s, like British guitar bands and stuff, like Manchester particularly. The Stone Roses is a big one. Charlatans, The Verve. And even now, more recently, there's been a lot of more 60s psychedelia and stuff being added in, like The Doors and Love, and obviously Beatles, Rolling Stones, all that.
Yeah.
Just the greats, really.
For sure. Yeah, and you just named, I mean, a lot of the bands we like. I got Alex into the Stone Roses recently. They aren't very big in North America. I'm not sure why, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely love them. And you mentioned Bob Marley, and that was something I was interested in, something I wanted to ask you, just like the artists that got you into music, maybe not the bands that influence the music you make, but just in terms of like musicianship. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, obviously, when I was younger, I was quite interested in gorillas as well. Obviously, the cartoons and stuff, it's something that would draw someone in that is quite young. So that's something that got me into music, just seeing all the images and stuff. And then I enjoyed their music, and I went to go see them live when they did the Humans tour. So that was good.
So how long have you guys been playing for? Because I know how you guys got together, and was it like friends of friends at school kind of thing coming together? Because I know when I was in a band before in high school, and we had our drummer come on before a couple episodes. We were all met at, like, we played baseball together, and then we all just ended up gravitating towards music, and he was one of the best musicians I known. I just wanted to ask, how did you guys kind of discover each other and just started playing together?
Yeah, well, me and Joe have been friends for like years. He's the guitarist. I've been friends with him since like year 8, year 9 in secondary school. So I've been mates with him for about 6 or 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And we've been in bands together before, but this one we changed things up because he's usually a bass player, and I said, "Do you want to play guitar for us?" So that's different. And he's a great guitarist, so I'm glad I did that.
Nice. Then guitar's a different jump.
Yeah. And then our drummer joined after he left uni. So he was looking for a band to join when he came back, and he joined us. And then bass player we found at an open mic. We just said, "Oh, not bass player. He was bass player. He joined on bass, then we moved into rhythm." So found him at an open mic and said, "Do you fancy joining?" And he did. And then we met Felix at college, who plays bass now. So it sort of just happened over the years. But together as 5 of us, we played for about 8, 9 months now, as 5 of us. As a 4-piece, we've been together for just over a year.
Yeah, and I noticed that because when I was like looking on you guys' Spotify and YouTube, there was like 6 songs, something like that on Spotify, and I really liked them. Like they were quite good for, well, not for anything, but just obviously you guys are a young band and haven't seemed to be together too long. And I was just wondering if you guys were maybe you can't talk about it, but if you guys were like working on an album and when maybe you plan to have it come out.
Yeah, we are definitely working on an album. Like it's written, but we're not recorded it yet. And I think that's something we're going to be looking to do maybe at the end of this year, early next year, and maybe get an album out, hopefully like mid to late 2024. That'd be quite good to do.
Nice. Is the name all hush hush right now? Is it can't say it?
Well, the name of the album.
Yeah.
Yeah, the name of the album. Yeah.
It's called Sometime Tomorrow.
Sometime tomorrow.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sometime tomorrow, coming out sometime next year. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here first. I mean, that's exciting,
Okay.
obviously. In terms of like what would you say you prefer as a musician? The live gigs, they both have their pros and cons, or like a recording studio session where you can just be creative and work things out together as a group.
To be fair, I love both. Like obviously when you play live, it's just like playing in front of a big crowd, the energy's there, like you bounce off each other and it just feeds like your energy to play. So you put more effort in, they are more up for it, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. However, like when we're in the recording studio, that's where your creative mastermind gets to come out, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And you can add in stuff that you wouldn't be able to maybe replicate live. So you can layer it with walls of guitars and stuff. So that's where your genius can really come out if you've got a vision or something. I like seeing the vision come to life. So it's kind of 50-50, but if I had to pick one, I'd have to say recording is probably my favorite, but I do love playing live.
Yeah, live is a special thing on its own. Just and like you said, the energy with the crowd is a huge thing because when you're on stage and there's like the crowd isn't, maybe not as large or it's just like the energy's not there. It kind of throws off a rhythm, which is
yeah, definitely. Like we've
Mhm.
played to a fair share of empty rooms.
But,
We've
but
been
and
there.
that's the thing. Then you got to
Everybody-
bring the energy, right? And that's the tough part
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
Everybody's been there. You can't look like you just don't want to be there because there's no one there. But you've got to sort of give it all you've got because there's the 5 people there. You don't know who's there. It could be someone really important, or it could just be someone who could be a fan for life after that. So
Yeah,
you've got to
and that's the
have your
thing.
A.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. But yeah, for sure. Like everyone starts somewhere, and you look at some bands like Oasis went from unsigned, unknown to the biggest band in the world in like 2 years, right? So you never know when it's going to happen, but you got to
Yeah,
keep
exactly.
putting your best foot forward. And you're the songwriter of the band, so I was just wondering because I'm not a musician, but I love music, and I'm not jealous. I'm more envious of people who are able to kind of put pen to paper and write something, beautiful. And I was just wondering, in your process, what comes first? Kind of the music or the lyrics, and how does that all blend together?
For me, it's always music first. What I do is just get some chords or something, or I'll play a riff or something like that. And if I like it, I'll stick with it, and I'll just basically sing nonsense on top until I've got something or a melody on top of that I like. So I follow that vocal melody and then just add lyrics to it. That's the way I've always done it.
Yeah, and so with music and music versus lyrics, that's always a tough one because music comes for me, I know it comes easier. But I just wanted to ask about your new single, The Thinker, about the music. So that the music came first with that one as well. Is it kind of the same progress as all your songs?
Yeah, well, with that song, I wrote it when I was really young, like 13. So me and Joe were on a phone call together, and he said, "Oh, I challenge you to write a song with this chord." I was like, "Okay, challenge accepted."
Nice.
And I opened it with that chord, and then just found some other chords to go to afterwards that fit well. And all of them are quite strange chords, like sevenths, weird variations of them. So yeah, I did that and just sang on top and got that melody I wanted and wrote lyrics to it. But sometimes what I do is I don't even write the lyrics down. Like I'll just sing from like your heart, and then it's quite good because it's like a stamp in time because you can look back at it in the future and then be like, wow, that's what I was feeling back then. You kind of understand it more when you know what you were going through back then.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's basically like having a journal or something where you write in it every day or once in a while, and then you look back and think, wow, that was very, that was a tough time, or wow, I was feeling, really great back then. So you obviously have a talent for songwriting. At 13, you wrote, and I listened to it. I mean, it's a very good song. At 13 is pretty crazy. In terms of songwriting, not to just, talk about other bands, but just in terms of yourself as a musician and a songwriter, like in terms of that, who was one of the inspirations or influenced you just as a songwriter?
More recently, the Doors have really inspired my music because Jim Morrison's poeticness of his lyrics are really something that interests me. The way he speaks in like metaphors and all that, it's very interesting to me. But Richard Ashcroft from The Verve's another one that's a great songwriter who really influences me at the minute. But really early on, there's obviously when I was about 12 or 13, Noel Gallagher from Oasis was a big influence. And that's obviously, I think, is quite an Oasis-y song because I did write that when I was really young. But my songwriting influences are changing all the time. Like Rolling Stones are one that's really come in recently as well.
And when I did listen to the Thinker, I did hear a bit of that influence, which is good. It was very the Oasis, and it was like that was probably one of my favorites of that you guys had here, the Thinker. It was All Begun. What was your
Only Just Begun?
Only Just Begun. I'd say. Sorry, my bad for butchering that one. But that was also probably up there for me too. And so you recorded that, you had them released about 5 months ago. So for about the 4 months you guys got together. I know you've known the your band members for a while now, and they've kind of you've all come at different times together. But did you write for like 4 months before, and then you just started releasing now, or you just had a couple in the bank before with some old bandmates? Like, what was
to be fair,
yeah.
Like lockdown was a big time for writing songs for me. When we went into lockdown, there's not a lot you could do because obviously as a musician you want to play live to people, you want to do that. But whilst we were in lockdown, you can't do that. So I needed to find something to do with myself, and I wasn't a massively experienced songwriter in that time. So I just thought I might as well try and master my craft.
Yeah, give it a go. Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically where most of them songs have come from, where they've just been left over from writing them in lockdown.
For sure. And if you were to give maybe some advice to, young musicians or young people who wanted to get into songwriting, how would you obviously everyone's different, but maybe what are some of the principles that you think could help people get started or improve as songwriters?
I think really never put something down and say, oh, it's bad, I'm not doing it again. Because everyone writes bad songs. But if you keep writing, you're going to get better. Like lockdown, I was very amateur songwriter. I didn't really know what I was doing. But eventually you get into a swing of things. You know what you want to sound like. You know what your songs need to sound like and what they go to. So just as you keep doing it, you'll keep getting better. You'll understand your lyrics more. You'll understand what you need, what needs to come next, really. And I think once people figure it out, they start to have something that's unique to them. So just keep sticking at it. That's all I'd say.
Yeah. And in terms of like relaying what's in your head and kind of giving it to the rest of the band, how do you kind of communicate that? Because I know a lot of bands, like most of them don't really write music, like in the formal sense. So how are you able to kind of, communicate what's in your head to your drummer, your bassist, your guitarist, and blend it all together?
Usually I just come in and show it them. Because I don't know how to read music. I can't write music either. I just play it, and if it sounds good, it's good. But I just go in and show it them. Sometimes one of them will write something else on top of it, like write their own part, like, oh, I've got this bass line, I've got this guitar riff. And Tom obviously does his own drums because I can't drum. But that's always something that interests me. Sometimes I'll give a little bit of input on drums to Tom, like I say, I think it needs this kind of beat or something. And I can give input to everyone else, but I just go in with a guitar and show it them, really.
That's great.
Sure.
So you show them the melody and the riffs that you have, and then from there they can build on and work with you about what works with the melody, everything. And that's how you songwrite. So it's like a nice amalgamation of the band coming together like that.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens, really, to be fair. But there's some songs where I'd record it on my laptop or something, or on my phone and then start adding stuff on top. And then say I can give them the riff. Like Only Just Begun was written just like solely by me. So I did the riff, the bass line, and everything. And that's basically how it all came. I just showed all their parts to them.
For sure. In terms of like maybe a plan, you guys are obviously a young band and it's difficult to project. I mean, obviously you just take it day by day, but in a few years' time, like what are kind of maybe some of the goals, or where do you see yourself a few years down the line, if you let yourself even look that far?
Yeah, well, we always talk about what could be. As every band, I think if you don't think you're gonna like make it, I don't think there's much point in doing it, to be honest, unless you didn't feel. But I would like to think that by the time in 5 years' time, I'd like to have a nice house and like to myself and a nice car. Yeah, but I do think the band's got everything it needs to make it, and I think we can really be one of the big bands of the UK. Hopefully, I know conquering the US is very hard. I think focus on the UK first. I want to conquer the UK in the next 5 years, and then maybe move on to the US next. Because I know a lot of people struggle with that. So let's just stick to the UK, try and conquer that, and we'll come over.
Definitely. And something we've kind of talked about on our show, kind of debated a little bit, was just how music has changed in this era of streaming and social media. Obviously, you guys are a band that's, thriving and working in this time, and you don't have experience of what things were like in the 80s and 90s beforehand. But what would you say is kind of the benefits of being a band in the streaming and social media era versus maybe some of the negative side?
I'm going to be honest. I think there's more negatives than positives now. But it's great for getting your music out to people you might not reach out to usually. Like if we were in the 90s or 80s or whatever, we'll probably only be reaching people in our hometown or just all around the UK at best. But now, because of social media, we can reach people like you guys and people all around the world, which is really good. You can connect people across the world with your music, and that's kind of beautiful. But there's a lot of bad things about social media, is the fact that there's so many bands now that can all have such easy access to it that you've got to sort of battle with about hundreds of other bands trying to do the same thing, and you've got to try and outshine them and everything. It's not really a competition, but if you want to be that cut above the rest, do you know what I mean? You've got to sort of be the best, and it's much harder to do that now.
I think another maybe negative thing in the social media aspect is a lot of people do like the quick bites, the quick sound bites of things that so they don't like sit and would listen. And so social media, especially like TikTok, people just scroll through it pretty fast and stuff like that, instead of like discovering and listening, which I just find social media is shortening attention spans, and that's no good for sitting down for an album, right? So
yeah, definitely not. Like, I mean, the best songs ever written are all really long. Like, look at Hey Jude or Stairway to Heaven or Bohemian Rhapsody. Would someone 14, 15 sit through that now? That's the question. But that's what social media is doing. I had a call with someone, like with a label, and they were like, oh, well, what we need is the vocals need to come in the first 18 seconds, and the song could be no longer than 3 minutes. I'm like, that's not very fair, is it? It's kind of limiting me on what I want to do. But what Marseille is about is kind of changing that. We don't want to listen to these people that think they know everything, when really we know that when music's good, it's good, and it will shine through.
So is that, sorry, Mitch, is that an industry, like happening in the industry now? Like they're telling you when certain things in the music, like songs, have to come, and like more standards kind of thing? Is that
like they're very controlling? Wow. Like, I've spoken to a lot, and they try and nitpick little things that aren't really that important. So I know a few other members in the band don't have long hair like me or Lennon. Someone said, you all need long hair. You can't just have two of you having long hair. It's like, you can't control our appearance. It's not very fair. Yeah, it's just so nitpicky. And what they want is like a complete package of people making songs under 3 minutes, vocals coming in before 18 seconds, and they'll just turn you into some absolute processed like shit. That's what they'll turn you into.
Yeah, and like that's something I've kind of talked about on the show too, is just like it's not that there aren't good bands out there or good musicians out there nowadays, like in 2023. It's more just the fact that the pop music, the things that's pushed on radio, pushed on social media, I just find is such cookie cutter music that I tend to gravitate more towards 90s, 60s, 70s music personally. But it's really cool, obviously, to see a band like you guys who aren't the biggest band, but you're on the way up, and you kind of do have you have a very different sound to what's kind of commonplace today on the radio and on the charts and that. Although I still think there's a lot of people, like you look at Oasis, perfect example, like these old bands, and not that they're that old, even like Stones, whatever, they're still massive today. There's still like a significant group of people who appreciate music that was unique, that was bands who weren't making music solely to try to become famous or try to be successful. It was more just about making the music, like putting their emotion, into the songs. And I think that's something you guys clearly prioritize and try to do.
Yeah, music always does come first. I think a lot of these good bands, they exist, but they either get swept under the rug because what they're doing is done wrong by these people, or they give in to these people and just become something they're not. And that's something we don't want to fall like subject to. And we also want to just make great music and have people like it for what it is. That's what we want to do. I want to push that back, because I feel like if one band does it, a lot of other bands are going to come out and do it too.
Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing with the what Mitch was saying, the formulaic cookie cutter music. And what's horrible about that is a lot of it's very time specific. And this is what I was saying before, is like it's they stamp themselves in this time where it's like, okay, they're not going to be, the song might not resonate with people like 5 years later, 10 years later. Where I found with your music, it has that timeless ring to it, that timeless feel that we're going to listen to it 10, 15, 20 years from now, and you're going to still relate to it in that sense, so it's not like the specific, like the super pop mainstream thing that's like talking about like very current things, in the sense of like, oh, they're singing about phones, they're singing about certain things, whereas you have that timeless sound, which I think, and that's going to carry you a long way.
Yeah, that's what we've always tried to avoid, like timestamps and stuff. Because even bands like the Arctic Monkeys, whilst they were revolutionary and they came out and they completely changed the scene, they talk about things that are very 2000s. And I think even now, their first few albums are beginning to sound a bit outdated, because they're talking about going out and a club time in England in the 2000s, and club culture now has changed like drastically in the last 20 years. So I think avoiding subjects that can only be tied down to a certain era is key, really, because the Beatles did it. They didn't sing about stuff that's going on in the 60s. They just sang about love. And that's never going to die, is it? It's always a thing.
For sure. And just maybe to get back a little bit more to specifically Marseille, and I guess you obviously mentioned like love, timeless songs. What would, if you were to just tell one, like a person who wasn't familiar with the band, what's like one song to get them into your music, and one song that maybe kind of encapsulates what you guys try to do?
It's a good question, to be fair, because we've got such quite a broad sound. Not all our stuff's out, but not two songs sound the same, really. So I would probably say one that would get all of it is maybe an unreleased song called Monkey in the Middle. But if you're talking about the ones that are out, it's got to be Probably Only Just Begun.
Yeah. And I noticed that, like, when I was listening to some of your songs, and when I listen to music, maybe it's not a good habit of mine, but I tend to kind of like, when I listen to a new band or new artist, my brain just naturally like makes connections to other things I've heard, like other bands. Not that I don't take into account the song itself, but I noticed that with your music, like you guys have a song that's like acoustic sounding, you have a song that's psychedelic, you have a song that's more of that sort of Manchester Stone Roses type sound. You have a bit more of like a rocking song, like an Oasis, you know, and I really enjoyed that because that's something I do like when I look at bands, is that variety of sound. And
Yeah.
sometimes some of the bigger bands that I may not be a big fan of, it's usually because I find all their songs kind of sound the same, you know, and it just gets a bit repetitive.
Yeah, there's bands that have major success on the first album and everyone loves it, but then they release 3 other albums that are the exact same as the first one and everyone's bored. But what we've tried to establish from quite early on is we're not going to release all the same stuff, because that's just trying to tie us down. Like, people are going to want more Only Just Begun to release 5 only just Begun type songs, or people are going to want more Thinkers if we put more Thinkers out. So you've got to kind of put that variety in the first place, so people know that we're not tied down to one thing. We can release something like Freedom again, and people expect it.
Yeah, it's good to keep the people guessing, obviously. Keep
Yeah.
it fresh. And then if you've got some time, I was thinking we could maybe just finish up with a little this or that rapid fire, and then just get to like maybe a last question or something.
Yeah, of course.
Something
Sounds
a
cool.
little light. All right, here we go. This or that. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
Queen or Led Zeppelin?
Led Zeppelin.
Oasis or the Stone Roses? And don't worry, it's not all bands.
The Stone Roses.
Stone Roses. Favorite song to cover? I'm not sure if you guys play covers at your gigs, but if you had to.
That's a good question. Break On Through by The Doors.
Oh,
Nice. Yeah,
That's a good
we love the Doors.
Oh yeah.
Favorite decade of music, if you had to pick one to listen to?
That's a tough one.
What'd you say? Sorry, 60s?
Yeah.
And then favorite song you've written. It could be released or unreleased, whichever one.
State of Mind. Unreleased.
Okay. Well, there's definitely, I mean, you mentioned that. You mentioned Monkey in the Middle as one that you thought was a really good kind of example of what you guys are capable of and what you guys do musically. So definitely some excitement around that album. I'll definitely check it out. Definitely, you've got another fan in me. I liked the music you guys released, and
you
we
got
really
me too there, man.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you coming on, talking music. Maybe we'll do it again when the album comes out.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be up for that 100%.
For sure. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Check them out. Marseille. What is your socials? Marseille Band on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yep. YouTube. Check them out. Marseille Band.
Last night I threw on your music on a speaker and listening. I was around the campfire with everybody, and they were like,
"Oh, wow.
Who are these guys?" And I was like, I'm like, "Hey, I'm interviewing these guys tomorrow. It's Marseille." And yeah, you got like 6 more fans there, because they're gonna start streaming your stuff. Yeah, because they're really loving it. Because I love putting people on new music, and I love listening to meeting people who can put me on music. And so I was just playing out loud, and I'm like, "Guys, what do you think?" And so you have about 6 or 8 more people that are gonna spread.
Definitely. In the US as well. We're slowly getting to conquering it. There we go.
You got a Canadian fan base. I'll tell you that right now. There you go.
Yeah.
We're gonna grow it.
Thanks for coming on, Will. That was really good.
Thanks so much for having us. Really, really, really appreciate that.